Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Medicaid Monday. And I want to go back to this earlier slide here that we had, just to clarify that this is now my partner. Frank was made partner a short time ago, and we're very thrilled that he has risen through the ranks and gotten to the point where he has become our firm's Medicaid expert. And we know, if you've been joining these in the past, how good he is at breaking down a very, very complex and difficult subject. So we're thrilled to have Frank as a partner in the firm and glad to be here with you to talk about Medicaid. This is the firm. These are our attorneys. We have offices primarily here in Latham, also in New York City, and we cover Long Island. We go up north to Plattsburgh, Lake Placid, Saranac. We go through the Hudson Valley, Hudson, Kingston, and those areas. And this is what we do. We work on Medicaid issues. We're going to talk today about Medicaid home care, which is a very, very important topic for anyone looking to stay at home and receive services at home. And of course, the alternative to home care is nursing home care, principally, or assisted living. So how do you stay at home? How do you get the care? And what are the details, the nitty gritty, the New York Independent Assessor rules? How do you navigate managed long-term care? How do you get the hours that you need in order to stay at home? How do you find caregivers, and what are the programs available to do that? And then what if you need care now? This whole process that's been created by the state of New York takes 4 months to 5 months from inception to the point in time when you get a paid caregiver in your home. What do you do if you need care sooner? And I'm going to turn it over to Frank, because we always have to start with the base numbers, because Medicaid is a means-tested program. So Frank, how do you navigate?
Yeah, so first you have to be financially eligible. Like, stop me if you've heard this before on any of the previous recordings that we've done for these. So to be income eligible, right, if you're a single person at home, it's $1,752 or less of monthly income. Again, if you're a couple, they don't just double the number. That goes up to $2,371 for the combined household. You have your community spouse income allowance. So that's the amount of income that your spouse can have, whether they're at home with you, or if you're in the nursing home and they're in the community, of their income allowance for $3,850, $350. And then that bottom one, again, kind of the most depressing one on the slide, it's $50. That is your personal needs allowance. If you are in the nursing home, it has been that way since 1965. Don't spend it all in one place, everybody.
So if you have $5,000 a month of income and you end up going into a nursing home, $4,950 of that goes to the nursing home. You get to keep $50, and the state then picks up the tab for the balance of your bill. In home care, it's very different. We'll go through those rules in just a moment. But not only do you have income rules to navigate, you also have asset rules.
Right. So our assets or resources, same term. Again, right, not great numbers, but better than just about anywhere else in the country. So if you're that single person needing Medicaid, your asset limit is $31,175 or less. If you're a couple where you have 2 people applying, that number goes up to $42,312. Your community spouse allowance, again, if you're that community spouse, you don't need Medicaid yourself, you have an asset limit as well of that $74,820. We did a whole webinar about spousal rules back in February. So if you have questions about this, go back in the previous recordings, check that out. And then the very bottom bullet, again, if you have spouses involved, right, you actually could get a combined spousal allowance up to $154,000. But again, go back to February for what that actually means, because that gets confusing and we got a lot to cover today.
So when we're budgeting and when we're doing the planning, our first several sessions were, how do you prepare? How do you plan? How do you use Medicaid asset protection trusts to have assets that are not countable assets? What counts, what doesn't? All of that factors in to the asset calculation. And when we're budgeting for a married couple and they're both still relatively healthy, one isn't on the doorstep of needing long-term care, we will typically leave about $75,000 to $100,000 outside of a trust, because if one needs care, we can shelter up to $75,000 for one on waivered services, where community Medicaid even, and chronic care Medicaid, but then the other spouse gets another $31,175.
Yeah, so combined between the two, we can shelter about 100,000, usually without too much questions asked. And that's important, right? Because at the end of the day, like Lou said right at the beginning, this takes a lot of time usually for people. And there could be gaps in coverage between when we've applied and we're actually receiving benefits. So having a pot of cash available to help stem the tide while everything's in process usually makes people feel more comfortable, number one, but it also might be necessary just because care might be needed in the interim.
So from a planning perspective, no two cases are alike. We have to look at all of the factors for each client individually, and we have to look at what the options are. So once we clear the hurdle of financial eligibility from an income and an asset perspective, what's the next step, Frank, for home care?
I mean, then we're trying to figure out just like what programs like make the most sense, right? Because at the end of the day, when people usually come in to talk to us about home care situations, it's normally the home care is needed now. They're not coming in prospectively. We wish more people would, but a lot of times people are already coming in with kind of the house already on fire, as you like to say. So then the question is, well, if the house is already on fire, the care is already needed, well, how are you going to make that work? And we've got a few different options for that. A lot of times people start with private pay, right? They find somebody that they know, or they go to an agency if they're lucky enough to be near one that has staff, and they're literally just paying for it, whether it's credit cards, it could be checks, it could be cash from the table, but whatever they need to do, they're just paying for care. Other times people, they go to their local county and their office for the aging, and they kind of see what resources are available there, and those people do great work, but at the end of the day, they have limited budgets, they have limited availability, they have limited resources. So they usually can get the ball rolling for some services, but it's not usually covering as much as they need. So if private pays out, if other government options are out, Medicaid's kind of the next one, where then we have to decide which program makes the most sense for you, whether that's pursuing an agency model through the managed long-term care program. It could be consumer directed, where you're hiring your own people, or it could be going to a waivered services program like the traumatic brain injury program or the nursing home transition diversion waiver. Or in certain geographic areas, we do have the PACE program, which again is kind of an all like inclusive umbrella of services that is very beneficial to people. It just isn't accessible by everyone. So you kind of have to just know the in and outs of what's available, how to qualify, how to get it, and how to get the ball rolling.
So if you watch the Olympics, you know that archery is an Olympic sport. And if you want to hit the bullseye, you have to have good aim. And if you want to get the care that you need, get the hours that you need, then you have to have the right program. You have to be able to find the right caregivers. And one of the programs that has evolved is the consumer-directed personal assistance program, which 10 years ago, the state was encouraging people to go on. It became so successful. Now they're changing the program to take it from 600 different agencies administering consumer-directed down to one, which is a change that we discussed at our Elder Law Forum back in May. So consumer-directed is where you find your own caregivers, and then you run them through the state payroll. These are all very, very different. You need to look at it from your own personal perspective. We give consultations to clients on a no-cost basis to talk about these options, direct the plan, and then go from there. But once you're financially eligible, and once you decide which program you're going to apply for, Frank and his staff prepare the Medicaid application. They prepare a pooled trust application, and then they go in with a target of a particular program and a particular number of hours. And how do you build your case to that? Well, New York State has created several hurdles, again, an Olympic sport, that you have to get over. And those hurdles are very, very difficult. And every year, it seems, they raise the hurdles just a little bit more. NYIA, the New York Independent Assessor, is a set of hurdles that you have to get over. And Frank, walk us through it.
So when I hear NYIA, right, if somebody says, who's NYIA? My first gut reaction is that they're the registered nurses who come in to do a community health assessment, right? They are nurses that are hired by the state to actually come in and assess people and determine, do you need a high level of care in your house, essentially? Yes or no, right? Do you need help with activities of daily living? Are you suitable for home health care? Because Lou, I'm sure you could go into lots and lots of detail about this if we had more time, but there have been past instances of fraud and people getting enrolled with programs and trying to get governmental benefits when they weren't actually in need of them. So this was one of the checks that were put in place in that whole system to make sure that people were only enrolling in the program if they actually needed the services, and the government would only pay for people that needed the services. So first hurdle is you have to get your community health assessment done. So a nurse will come out, they can either come to the home or they can do it virtually, but essentially they are going to meet with the Medicaid applicant, and they're going to go through an assessment tool, and they're going to determine what do you need help with, how much help do you need, and how much care and time do you need to actually get those activities dealt with, like by a home healthcare aide in your house?
What's your experience today in terms of the number of in-person versus virtual?
It's a good question. I think it generally is still done more virtually than in home. During COVID, there was no choice, right? When the system kind of went live, it was still kind of during the heights of COVID and things, and there weren't really other choices, right? It kind of had to be done virtually. You can insist on getting an in-person one done. They have to provide that. The issue with that obviously comes with that could just be more delay, right? More issues finding that nurse to come out to do the assessment. But obviously, if you think about it, right, if their whole purpose of that visit is to adequately see someone in their home and how they do things, right? How do they get out of that chair? How do they get out of bed? Can they make their meals? You know, can they do all the things that they want to know that they actually have to assess? That's kind of hard to grasp through technology sometimes, right? So in a lot of instances, we generally counsel it's better to be done in person if it can be done in person, but obviously every case is unique.
So right now we're at a point, and last month we covered the buildup to the assessment process. And that is you get your finances in order. You do a Medicaid asset protection trust, you move your assets. You do a pooled income trust, you allocate income to that to get yourself down to the 1752 monthly income allowance. Then you pick your program and you identify what aids are going to be available to you. And this is literally community by community, and in some cases block by block, what aids, what agencies, what care is going to be available in a particular area. And then you start the process by filing your application. And that's when you get to step one, that community health assessment. We're going to talk, we have a slide on the timeframes, but to do this, Frank, this is a timely process.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing with this is, you know, this is kind of the first hurdle, right? To keep using the Olympic analogies. This is the first hurdle. You don't get your help in your house until you get this part done. And this is definitely one of the things that I think has had its challenges along the way. Again, when this system kind of went live, you know, we were hearing horror stories from people saying they couldn't get these assessments scheduled for 3-4 weeks out, right? Or there weren't even availability then, or because it was all done virtually, they could only do it virtual visits, but the applicant didn't have internet in their house, right? So they couldn't do it that way either because they literally couldn't use the technology that they needed to get this done. So the take home point of this is, well, it's cumbersome, right? It's usually a 3-hour assessment. There's a lot of questions, right? There's a lot of information that's gathered, but without this, you don't get any further. And the biggest thing, again, is they're really just finding out, do you need care? Yes or no? Do you need help with activities of daily living? Yes or no? Just so you can kind of continue down the funnel, down towards the actual care getting in place.
And rather than shooting into the dark, we like to work with care coordinators or care managers who can do an independent assessment and help you identify the need for care, the resources in your community, which program is best for you. We can do that to a certain extent as lawyers, but we are not trained. We're not going to go into the home and assess the home and the caregivers and the available family care that then supplements what Medicaid will provide. So having a care coordinator at this stage, at the point in time of Medicaid home care application, we think is a tremendous advantage, because when you get to step 3, we'll talk more about it, but that impact and the power of having a good care coordinator who's knowledgeable in the rules can't be overstated.
Step 2, right? Once you get your assessment done by this nurse, right, now you have to go and get your clinical assessment, right, which is done by a independent doctor, or you know, other medical professional like a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant. But essentially,
why can't my doctor do it, Frank?
Well, see, this is the fun part, right? This is where all the fun changes came in. Right, your doctor used to be able to do all this, and then again, when they brought in NYIA and they kind of rebooted this whole system, they decided again to kind of keep a check on everything. That now you needed an independent doctor. You needed somebody that had never seen mom or dad or your loved one before to help determine, do they need care in their house and what level and everything that we've been talking about.
And is that doctor doing a house call?
No, they again, I think they could be done in person, right? If you want to take your loved one to this doctor's office, right, or this office where this medical professional is. They certainly could do it in person, but again, most of the time it's probably going to be more likely to be done virtually, like how we're doing this webinar. So you have an independent medical professional, it's never met your people, never seen their medical record, never seen them other than how they're viewing them through the screen, and then making determinations on a medical side of things about what they can and cannot do, how they function, what kind of care they need. And your doctor, the person's doctor, they're not involved at this step anymore.
So when you're preparing for step 3, think about steps 1 and 2. What do you need to do as a Medicaid applicant on your own to build your case to get the number of hours of care? Because that's the holy grail. If you go in and you do all of these steps, you go through the financial application, the pool trust, the Medicaid trust, you get determined to be financially eligible, you go through the independent assessment, you go through the medical assessment, you get to step 3 and you get 4 hours a day when you need 16. What kinds of things should people be thinking about, Frank, in building the case along this path?
So obviously, first thing, couldn't agree more with what you said just a slide or so ago when you were talking about that care coordinator, right?
Mhm.
Having that social worker that's kind of building your case along with you, because obviously there are appeal points throughout this process, right? We've done webinars on appeals and fighting for more hours and talking about fair hearings and things. So building your record right from the start is never a bad idea. So the idea of having another independent person that's kind of building a record along with you is never a bad idea. Other big thing that I would say is at these assessments, whether it's the nurse assessment, whether it's the clinical assessment, it's very important to make sure that accurate information is being given, because I can tell you in my almost 10 years of working now with seniors, right, if you ask a senior person, do you need help with things, right? Are you able to take care of yourself? Can you manage on your own? Not everyone will say yes, but a lot of people may just say yes, whether that's true or not, or they might significantly downplay the amount of help that they need. And kind of the worst parts of this system is that it's geared to have you fail. And if you tell people, right, whether it's that initial nurse or it's the clinical assessment with this doctor that you're okay, that you don't need help, that you can manage on your own, they're going to score you appropriately. And they might not give you the care at all because you said you didn't need it. And while pride is a very powerful thing, and it's important to a lot of people to not become, completely dependent on everyone else for their needs in their everyday life, it's very important to make sure that accurate information is being given at these things, because at the end of the day, the accurate information is gonna what leads to the help. And that's the only way that you're going to get it.
Not only do individuals say, I've got it covered, I can do this, I can go to the bathroom by myself, I can shower myself, don't worry about me. When it's not true, and the children are generally the ones that know it's not true, but spouses also want to cover for their spouse. So you have to coach through this process. And once you get through that initial process, 2A is choose your MLTC.
Yeah. So once you kind of get through, right, all of the assessment parts, right, we have the nurse's assessment, we have the clinical assessment. For most people, then we're going to talk about enrolling with that managed long-term care company, which essentially is an insurance company. They're the ones that are either going to contact that, work with that local agency to pay for aides to come in from an agency, or they're going to help you get on board with the consumer directed program where you can get your own people put on payroll and get them paid, to provide those Medicaid hours that are going to be awarded. But I think one of the most surprising parts for people with this part is, like, once you get to the MLTC enrollment, first you have to find a provider, right? And there is a website that lists all of them. We do have the link here in the materials. So you have to find a provider, right? An MLTC that services the county in which you reside. Then you have to call them, and then you have to get another assessment done now with another nurse. But now the nurse isn't from the state. Now it's a nurse from the managed long-term care company. They're going to come in and they're going to redo that evaluation. And then they're going to ask you the same types of things of what you can and cannot do. And ultimately, they're going to take all that information, and ultimately they will then award in a number of hours that Medicaid will then pay either to that agency or to your caregivers to get paid by the consumer directed program. So there's once I think everybody kind of thinks, all right, I went through the first hurdle with the nurse, then I saw the doctor that we didn't know, then I called the insurance company, I should be good. No, you kind of have another assessment buried in there. And that last one is your most important in a lot of ways, because that's where your hours are coming from. So if you're kind of taking some of the advice we've talked about, right, having that care coordinator, that social worker with you, if you hadn't brought them in until now, up until this part, okay, but like if there's one place that I think they're going to be the absolute most critical to one person if you had to pick and choose, it's probably here.
Yep.
Because this is where the hours get determined, and this is where the fights are going to happen. If there are going to be fights about how many hours are going to be awarded.
Legal fights.
Yeah, not fist fights, but the legal fights. So having that professional in your corner again, right from the get-go, so that they can say, I was there in the assessment. I saw what they were assessing. I saw how the responses, the information wasn't accurate, or how could you only award 4 number of hours for that level of care?
Right.
So it's that kind of thing, building your case right from the ground up.
We'd like to get a statement from the treating physician, regardless of the fact that it's not part of the New York State system anymore. Because when you go to fair hearing, having evidence of what the true needs are of the individual is critical. So step 3, now it's not a 110-meter hurdle race, it's a 220-meter hurdle race. And if you watch the runners finish those races, they're falling over the finish line because they exhaust you. They've created this process. And now, if you need more than 12 hours a day, they can send you to an independent panel of physicians.
Right, more people you don't know, right? Just to make sure that they're on board with everything that's been done up to that point, right? They're going to look at your health assessment, your practitioner's order, and everything that came from your visit. They're going to look at the plan of care that then got instituted amongst kind of the whole way. And Lou, I think you can certainly speak to this because of just, I think, the history that kind of goes around with this. But they've couched a lot of this as being necessary because they want to keep people safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I certainly know we've had thoughts about kind of how they've worded that and how they've kind of framed that. But couching all this under, we're trying to keep people safe, could just be another way that they're just trying to keep people out of the system and maybe get them out of their homes and into institutions.
And the longer they make the process, the more Medicaid is paying for the care, because you're not getting reimbursed for the care that you're paying for at home. So they delay, and then once you're approved, they minimize the number of hours that you're eligible for. So you need to be advocating throughout this process. And the independent physician panel, I don't have a lot of experience with it. No one does. It's very, very new. But if you can't be safe at home, whose judgment is that? And what are the legal standards for that safety? If you have a care plan that's been independently crafted for you by your own treating physician and a qualified care manager, I think you have great arguments to be at home and stay there safely based upon all of that evidence.
And they can't, and then just to kind of put a pin in this one until we keep moving. But the independent review panel, they can't even specify the number of hours that they think that you need. So kind of a strange scenario that this is in, right? You have these people reviewing the file up until this point, and they can kind of say, this sounds good or this doesn't. They can make recommendations, but they're not even going to say, no, we disagree. This person needs 18 hours a day. You said 12. They can't even really do that. So again, it's all kind of nebulous. It's new, and it's scary.
So you go into the Supreme Court, we remand it for further proceedings at the court below. And then you have to go back through the whole process again to figure out what is a safe plan of care in the home. Always better to have your own plan and to be able to put that up against what the state is telling you your plan should be. And this is a chart, the labyrinthian process of Medicaid application.
Yeah, so obviously we only have a few minutes left, so we're not going to go bullet by bullet here, but this is kind of just outlining everything that we've kind of talked about between going through your assessment, your clinical appointments, where everything happens, getting ultimately the plan to authorize your care, enrolling with your agency, right, or going to CDPAP, getting your caregiver signed up. This is why it takes so long, right? This is exactly why the process isn't a 2 to 3 month thing anymore, because of all the hurdles that they put on the financial side, which was last month's webinar, and now on the care side, which is becoming, as we've kind of been hinting, more and more onerous because you have more and more and more hurdles.
So disappointing results are not uncommon in this area. What are your remedies? Internal appeals?
Yeah, so first thing I put was your applications aren't even getting done quickly, because I can tell you, we're in contact with all the local county offices around the Capital District where we are. Everyone's short-staffed. Everyone's working really hard. The county workers are generally really good to work with. It's just they're like everybody else. They can't find staff. They have too much to do, not enough time to do it. So even if you had that simpler application, sometimes we don't get the approval nearly as fast as we used to because the counties can't turn around as fast. Once you get through the county, well, then sometimes you can't get that community health assessment or the clinical appointment scheduled within that 14-day period because there aren't people available to do that or the technology doesn't work. And then at the end, the one that I think usually comes up the most when people just talk about results is again, we're seeing managed long-term care companies short people hours, right? Where we have to then talk about remedies for that, whether that's internal appeal, external appeal, ultimately go to fair hearing. But again, that's become a protracted process that takes longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. And again, with the system kind of hoping that you'll fail, like they're kind of getting what they want.
If you do this without advocacy, without someone guiding you through the process, you're at the whim of the state. And no one wants to be there where your destiny is being controlled by someone that you don't know, that's never met you before. And that's who's determining what your health care is and what your available hours in the home are. So advocate, advocate, advocate. If you're a caregiver, you have to take on that responsibility very seriously. Hire the right professionals, whether it's a care manager, a qualified elder law firm, but have people that have done this before, that know the track, know the patterns, know how to prepare you for all the things that are part of that application. And when these rules were passed and we had that chart, we took it to the New York State legislature and we said, here's what you've created. It's a 5-month wait for someone who applies for Medicaid home care. How do they discharge out of the hospital? How do you find appropriate care for people? So the legislature passed another program on top of the other program to do the things that the first one should have done, and it's called the Immediate Needs Program.
Yeah, which is, we use it when we need to. Biggest thing here is you need to have your complete application done. So obviously working with a professional that's done these a few times, certainly in your best interest, because if it's not complete, they'll just give you a document request. And again, it will just take longer. And you do need some additional things. You need an attestation of immediate need, typically would be signed by the applicant or a family member. There's some physician forms and orders that have to be completed. At the end of the day, it's a few more pieces of paper. You just have to make sure that everything's in order. And as long as everything's in line, right, Medicaid can be authorized in as little as 12 days. And then, unfortunately, NYIA then gets involved, because then for a while, NYIA wasn't involved at all with immediate needs. That's since changed. And now NYIA is going to get involved to do the health assessment, the clinical appointment, everything that we kind of talked from the first few steps of the process. The difference is once those are over, instead of going to your MLTC for enrollment, you're going to go back to your local county to determine plan of care and to kind of take it from there, which is kind of where they used to fit into this whole equation, right? You go back far enough. So that's where it gets a little bit wonky of who's involved, but the counties still are involved to a degree. So we just wanted to point that out.
So we file more applications as immediate needs applications the longer we do this, because we're already doing the medical side. We're already preparing our clients for the health information that they need. So that's part of the immediate needs application. We think it's worthwhile to get that process expedited to get care into the home because it's prohibitively expensive. If you're paying $10,000 a month for home health care, how long can you do that? How long can people stay in this process if it's 5 or 6 months until care gets turned on?
And then obviously just some helpful hints and links and phone numbers here. So if you ever have to reach NYIA, the number's right there. And then if you want to see a list of the MLTC plans and which counties they cover, because obviously it is county specific, there's a whole long, very long list on the health department website, and the link is right there.
We'll take questions in a moment, but I just want to let you know that next month, September 9th, will be our next Medicaid Monday at noon. And we're doing a new topic. We haven't really covered this topic before, and we keep being told that there are going to be look-back rules for home health care. It's a 30-month look-back period. This got passed 3 years ago during COVID. It's been pushed off, the implementation. We're being told sometime in 2025, New York State may do this. There is legislation that's been proposed to take this off the table and to take away the look-back period for home care, but we want everyone to be prepared. So join us on September 9th, and we'll be talking about the look-back period for nursing home care, which we can navigate because we know it, and what we're anticipating to be the look-back period for home care.
Yeah, we did a lot of education on this back in 2020 when all these rules had passed, but because it's been so nebulous for a while, we thought it might be a good idea to rehash some of those thoughts and kind of see like what all that would look like, since maybe it's coming next year.
And the look-back periods confuse people anyway. And there are so many exemptions to the look-back rules, et cetera. So we'll cover all of that